at school, it has to be okay with teaching kids what they don't want to do with their life as much as we teach them what they do want to do with their life. And that's what these experiences are all about. Like, you may find that you love to write a grant, or you may find that I hate to dictate and write grants. Right. But I'd much rather stand in front of a room and talk about playground paradise. So again, that's just to say the point that I think we have to be okay with teaching kids what they don't want to do with their lives, so they don't spend a lot of time figuring out when they're adults.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Future is Clear, Teach Like It's 2045 webcast series. My name is Scott Carr from CESA 2, and I'm joined here today by a real rock star from Indiana, Aaron Black, from Libery Perry School District in Indiana. How's it going, Aaron?
Great, Scott. I'm so thankful that you're having me on, and I'm humbled that you call me a rock star. We'll see what your viewers think by the time we're done here, but I do appreciate the work you're doing and humbled to be a part of it.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. I think you're a rock star. We met back in, I think it was January-ish. And yes. I was connected through Holly Clark in Beable. So I really appreciate Holly connecting us, and we had some nice conversation, and my eyes really opened up to some of the things that you were doing at that point when you were at Randolph Eastern. But I really appreciate you taking the time. Our topic area, as some may know, it's using innovative work-based learning to move mindsets and create a culture to support career exploration. And Aaron, I'm sure we'll probably shift off of that a little bit, but I thought we needed something to kind of guide us as we go through this. So, hey, tell us, how is the start of the year going for you? You're probably very, very busy, shifting from one school district to another, but how's it going so far?
That's actually been a great start for me. Anybody that's changed administrative jobs always knows that there's a honeymoon period that occurs where you just don't know what you don't know. And that's kind of where I sit here with Liberty Perry. I was at Randolph Eastern for almost 13 years, and you just get to know folks. And I opened here not knowing very many names of faces, and this time last year I was at Randolph Eastern where I knew everybody's names, their spouses' names, their kids' names, and sometimes what they ate for dinner the night before. So that's going to change, but it's been a welcome change. It's been really good for me. Extremely proud of the work that we did at Randolph Eastern, and really hoping to translate some of that here at Liberty Perry.
Yeah, you're in a smaller town, are you? I think is it Selma, Indiana?
Yes, sir. So, and it's only about 30 minutes from Randolph Eastern. So my wife teaches at Randolph Eastern, and my kids go to schools there. So that was part of the reason for the change, create some distance between dad and husband and the work there. Selma is a smaller town, but it's actually a larger district. About 1,200 students here, served about 850 at Randolph Eastern.
Yeah. How big is the community there?
The community itself is tiny. Selma is only about 1,000 folks, but it's considered, I would call, a suburb of Muncie, Indiana, the home of Ball State University. So that's where a lot of our folks come from, that area.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you wearing a Wisconsin Badger shirt there, and we definitely won't hold it against you that the Packers play Indianapolis this coming Sunday. So we'll see how that turns out. But
well, it's interesting, Scott. I served as the superintendent of Liberty Perry School Corporation, but our elementary and middle school are Selma Elementary and Middle School, and our high school is Wapahani High School. So nobody knows who I am or where I'm at when I say Liberty Perry. So I wear a lot of Wapahani gear.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I want to let everybody know that we are recording this webcast, and that if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll be able to receive not only this webcast, but the others that we have. We've got a great list, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, Aaron. But and anybody that's on this webcast with us live, feel free to drop a question in the chat box for either myself or Aaron as we go along. So, all right, let's get started. You've done some very unique things as a superintendent at your previous school. I'm sure you probably got this in line moving forward at your new school. And so I'm curious to get the why behind it. Tell us a little bit about your journey a little bit about why you've decided to move towards that type of an educational system.
Sure. So my why actually kind of goes into my upbringing. I share when I speak at workshops and things. I always open with my educational journey, and I grew up in poverty, the youngest of 5 kids, and it was I really never knew the value of education because I just never connected it to my future. I attended school for athletics and athletics only. And luckily, when I was a junior, senior, there was a couple teachers that saw something in me that I just didn't, that led me on to a secondary experience. But I grew up seeing hard work from my parents. They knew how to work hard and knew what it took to make ends meet. But that has really impacted my journey through education throughout. I've always gravitated towards those kids that are on the fringe, that just need help seeing their skill set and connecting them to what their future could be. And so that's really what led my work and creates my why. Till my why are two things, Scott, and I think I've shared this with you before. But number one is I don't think a student's educational experience should be dictated by their zip code. I don't think that's fair to anybody. So I say that pretty loud. And number two, I really believe in all students all the time. That means from your valedictorian to that student finishing last in their senior class, I think they all deserve a chance to have some connection and education to their future. And career connected learning creates that bridge for those students, especially on the friends that may not have someone at home saying, here's what life could be for you.
Yeah, yeah, you say it very well. You and I've got kind of that similar why, I think. Myself, I grew up in a family with 3 boys, the youngest of 3, and both of my brothers went on to college. And this goes back, I graduated mid 80s, and I kind of looked at my dad when I was done with high school, and he says, either college or drive a truck. And so I said, all right, I'll move on to college. Back in that day, of it was either college or a trade or something like that. So luckily, I played a sport in college myself. Did you play a sport in college?
No, I kind of missed the boat there. I'll tell you, it's interesting you share that. I graduated from high school and then determined I wasn't going to go to college and went to a local lumber yard and working. And I remember very clearly having my hands in our sink with ice from the old ice trays,
Yeah.
and I think soaking my hands because they hurt so bad. And my dad just very kindly saying, "Are you sure you don't want to go to college?" And it was literally that moment that kind of changed my trajectory, saying, "You know what? I don't want to do this the rest of my life."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that'd be true for me too. But so I mean, we know the reason, right? There's obviously a lot of reasons out there for the why we need to really move into a transformation, a different look in our educational system. But I'm really super curious to hear a little bit about some of the real impactful things that you've done around work-based learning, some of the other things that you've done. And what does it look like? At your best, your previous school and what you have out in front of you and your vision, what are some of the impactful things that you've done around work-based learning opportunities?
Well, I think it's important that when you talk to employers, and I was in Switzerland this summer, just kind of engaging in their apprentice programs and just seeing how they built that for their kids. And it always started with the employer voice as far as employers were saying, here's what we need. And when you unpack what employers want, whether it's in Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, it doesn't matter. They're going to tell you those power skills. I call them power skills. Some people call them soft skills. The ability to collaborate, the ability to show up on time, the ability to learn, the ability of the problem solve, right? Very few employers are screaming, hey, we need kids that articulate themselves better through dictation, or we need kids that understand historical references better. They're talking about the skills that kids are needing and that they desperately need in the workforce. And so we started there at Randolph Eastern with those conversations. And then as we talked to our kids, they aligned. Our kids had an interest in learning those skills, but they didn't see that happening in the traditional setting. So what we did at Randolph Eastern, and one of the things I think we'll see ourselves doing here at Libery Perry over time, is we created what we call Workforce Wednesdays, which was an opportunity where we left the traditional setting for 1 day a week on Wednesdays, and we engaged our high school kids in work-based learning. And that came out in a lot of different ways. To get teacher buy-in, we started with them. We said, what are some projects that you're passionate about that you feel like you could get rubbed off on some students? And we had teachers come up with some really creative ideas. For example, we had a group called Senior Smiles that spent 2 hours out with at our assisted living, loving on our elderly folks in our community, painting nails, doing their hair, dancing, playing board games, those type of things. We had a group that was raising funds for a local park for a splash pad. So they were learning how to write grants and do all these things that are applicable. They had a group that was created called a farm and stable group that was, they tasked themselves with building a chicken coop so they could have laying eggs and meat birds so they could supply good quality eggs and meat to a community that's in a food desert. So students were problem solving and actually solving real life problems for our community. Had no idea they were learning, Scott. That's the beautiful thing is that the amount of learning that's happening in that space on Wednesdays is outstanding, and our kids don't know it, right? They're just doing, and they're finding things they're passionate about in each of those projects. So I would say to anybody at school that's looking at how do we do this for all, I think we have a little more ability to do that within our structures of a school day than what we realize. We don't have to just think about work-based learning as being job shadows, apprenticeships, those type of things. A lot of the work-based learning skills can happen in the school. It's just really hard to make that happen in U.S. history. And I'm a U.S. history guy, so that's not a shot at our social studies teachers, but it's hard to make those things a reality in those settings. So you have to create settings that kids can excel in those work-based learning experiences.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Outstanding. Wow. So if I'm getting it right, was this just at the high school level, or did you do this, all the way through your school system? And what I'm hearing you say, this was every Wednesday? You're wow. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, what was it all the way through K-12?
Yeah, so it looked different everywhere, right? So our seventh graders had a version of Workforce Wednesday. Their projects were a little more guided. They did that, but some groups were doing coding. Some groups were just doing academic resource type stuff, and then the other groups were doing like career exploration. We partnered with some really cool partners to do some career exploration with those grade levels. And what it looks like in K6 is they had something they call Future Ready Friday. So going back to Holly's connection to you and I, being a Beable school and really working hard on the world of work stuff, RISEC, our kids knowing their strengths, interests, and values. So that's what that would look like pre-K6. So our kids would have a lot of conversations on what their strengths, interests, and values were. And on Fridays would make connections with their strengths, interests, and values to a career that they could have in their future. And we know our strengths, interests, and values change, but at least they were developing a language on how to articulate what they're passionate about. Because I think the sad part is I think we have a lot of kids walking hallways that just don't know what they're passionate about.
Right.
And when you unlock that, when you unlock their strengths, interests, and values, it's much easier to make a connection to what they're learning in the classroom, because then they realize that means I can do X, Y, Z when I get out of this place.
Right. I was just going to ask, I make the statement that I'm sure that this allowed your students to find relevance in your school system, right? So tell me a little bit, did it have impacts on other things that we see traditionally that we have issues in our school systems, attendance, behavior, some of those things. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. All educators want what's your data to back up that
Right.
this experience. So knowing that we didn't apply grades to what happened on Workforce Wednesday, but we're working towards applying competencies where kids get credit for what they learn in each of those settings. But what I will tell you that happened that we weren't real sure about, attendance was better, parties were down, and discipline referrals were nearly zero on Wednesday. And that did not even compare to what we were experiencing on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So kids were engaged, they wanted to be there, and they weren't acting out because I think they actually enjoyed what they were doing.
Wow, outstanding. Wow. So tell me a little bit about, how did you get staff committed to this? How did you have to shift that emotional investment where you saw this real buy-in, believe in, tell me a little bit about how did you get to that?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer, Scott, and adult problems should never get and be a hurdle for doing what's best for kids. However, happy teachers create happy learning environments. So we started a place where we asked our teachers, you know what's your passions? So for 2 years prior to moving to Workforce Wednesdays, we had Passion Project Week in May where every teacher just pushed out a passion project that they were passionate about. Sometimes it was relevant, sometimes it wasn't. Some would have 4 kids sign up and some would have 40 kids sign up. But we let them develop their strengths and values and share those with kids. We had, passion projects where teachers passionate about camping. So she would take the afternoon and teach kids how to build a fire, how to put a tent up, how to cook over a campfire, just little things like that. And what that did for us is it created a buy-in from our staff that just as much as we were interested in learning the strengths, interests, and values of our kids, we want to know the strengths, interests, and values of our staff. So that first semester of Workforce Wednesdays, it was kind of top down, not kind of, it was top down. The staff said, here's what we would like to offer, and here's what I'm passionate about. Kids signed up. Second semester became organic, where we started surveying students and saying, now you have all these options. What else would you like to see? And that created a space where we had to engage more community partners, more staff members. And we learned that we had a lot of staff that were actually passionate about some of the things our kids were passionate about. So it just organically grew. But buy-in, to your point, came with just giving our teachers the autonomy to do something that they were passionate about.
Wow. Wow, that's really cool. How about your community? I mean, what was the response out of businesses, organizations, or even like your parents?
It was overwhelmingly positive. And I think anybody that's watching this, that's a school person, has seen on social media where a community member or parent takes a shot saying, well, we don't teach our kids how to change the oil, cook a meal, balance a checkbook, do those things that they need to learn in life. Well, this was an opportunity for us to make those a reality for our kids in different settings. And so it was responded to extremely well.
Oh, that's great. Some of the work that I'm, doing in our state is really shifting those mindsets and we get ourselves all the way into the school systems and working with teachers, so kind of going through what you went through. How would you describe this as being different from some of the other initiatives? I hate to use that word, right? But initiatives that we've seen come through our states, like personalized learning or project-based learning, because this sounds a lot different than that. How would you describe it as it being different?
Well, I think for our educators' sake, especially coming out of COVID, we did have to market it as something different. And it certainly was. It's project-based learning on steroids in some ways, but in education, we've got a really bad habit of jumping on buzzwords, and leaders get in this situation where they jump on a buzzword that they're really not sure what the impact would be on students. In this situation, it wasn't a buzzword. It was something that we created from within. We talked to our employers, we talked to our teachers, we talked to our kids, all kind of aligned. So it wasn't an initiative that came down from the state. So there was nobody from the states telling us, hey, you've got to do this. There weren't standards tied to it. So I think that allowed some freedom for our teachers as well. So I think that probably helped, knowing that it wasn't an expectation from our state legislators.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, to me, this is a major shift, taking one full day out of your week. And Yeah, I love the idea. You knew it right when we talked about it last time. So if you were to offer advice to another, another leader, another superintendent, if they are interested at some point wanting to get to that point where one of their days out of a school week is a workforce, work-based learning day, what would be your advice?
A couple things. One, get as many of your rock stars to see something like that in action. Right? We didn't have a lot of places to refer our folks to see it other than a couple charters in the state of Indiana that just live on project-based learning, right? So
Mhm.
get your folks to see it and be okay with starting small and be okay with diving in the strengths, interests, and values of your staff. I think
Mm.
that's a miss again for leaders. We ask our teachers every day to build positive relationships with our kids, and don't be afraid to build those relationships with your teachers to get the buy-in for something like this. But yeah, start small. For us, it all started with Passion Project Week at the end of the year when everybody's just trying to scramble and hold on for dear life, they've kind of been through the content, so that's where it built out for us. But I think that was an okay step for those of us that are kind of impatient when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, I never even thought about it. I mean, it fits with the work that I'm doing. The fact that you say, playing to the strengths of the staff really does lean into what they're good at in a way that can be outside of education too, a little bit. But all right, so I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about that. I hear your state is moving to like a different high school diploma. They're like revamping it, pushing towards individualized learning, which some of the work that you're doing already or have done at your previous school, but I'm sure you'll do at Liberty Perry. But tell us a little bit about, what's happening in your state. What's the buzz?
Yeah, so with high school redesign is the topic in the state of Indiana, and what the buzz is, to be quite honest with you, is work-based learning is a big piece of it, but the bigger conversation is how do you create flexibility for a student schedule so they can take part in work-based learning experiences. And work-based learning is going to look a lot of difference between a lot of schools, but the state is looking at an avenue with a diploma requirement. So just a little context, our state legislators 2 years kind of sunset our current diploma requirements for December of this year, saying next year's freshmen are the last class that can graduate under this current diploma requirement. So there's a legislative push to change and kind of blow up the current process. So it started a lot of conversation, and the conversation came back to our employers want these skills in our kids. How do we build that out in the schools? So our department got very creative and attacked the diploma requirements. It's not a huge change as far as if you look side by side, but as far as the courses that kids can take, but the ability to take what they want, kind of a smorgasbord approach that allows freedom. So they will have access to work-based learning is the biggest mindset change that we're seeing here. And again, obviously something I'm very excited about. I've been a part of those conversations with Dr. Jenner, who's an incredible educational leader here in the state of Indiana from the get-go. And probably one of the biggest compliments. I'm still trying to I joke with her. I'm not sure if it was a compliment or not, but she said it in a conference. If they can do this at Randolph Eastern, you can do it anywhere. Again, I'm not sure how to take that, but I guess it was a proof point that in rural,
Yeah.
low income Indiana, if they can figure this out, how to create opportunities for kids, we can really come together and figure that out for 1.1 million kids in the state of Indiana.
Yeah. 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 I compliment you on the things you've been doing or what we talked about. I think it's great. What is the response that you're hearing out of the state in general? I mean, is this strongly being embraced by other school districts, or are you hearing, what is this going to look like? What does that sound like and look like?
So it's a mixed bag, and the mixed bag really comes collectively, and I think you would agree that educators want what's best for kids.
Right.
But sometimes when they get these top-down pushes from legislators or the department, they just throw up this wall. and they don't want any part of it. So the mixed bag of emotions in Indiana is some are really excited about the flexibility and some are just really nervous. And the nervousness comes from, well, how do we track this? How do we track these skills in our students and those type of things? And again, in my opinion, that becomes more of an adult issue that we can work through, logistics issue that we can certainly work through. But just like any other initiative, it's come with mixed response, and higher ed has struggled with it a little bit, to be quite honest with you, because I think there was some thoughts that the attempt was to water down the educational experience.
Yeah.
And if I was really could get every legislator in the state of Indiana to go to Randolph Eastern and see what happens on Wednesday, they'd be hard pressed to tell me that that experience is watering down. And in my opinion, it was kind of putting the experience on steroids.
Yeah, agreed. It's, I'm experiencing with some of the work that I'm doing, which tends to start with systems change, right? Shifting mindsets all the way into the classroom because we're conditioned to do education traditionally the way it's happened.
Right.
So, I mean, hey, if you need any help, any ideas, I'm on board. Let me know. I think maybe we'd make a good team working together. I'd love to get involved with you. But what would you say to somebody in your state though, as they hear this coming through? What's the plan of action to be able to shift mindsets in your state? Do you guys have something like that? Or if you don't, what would be a recommendation?
So I think what we see in the state is really working hard to champion those schools that are doing this and doing it at a high level. And it's not just Randolph Eastern. There's a number of schools in the state of Indiana. And what we see in the state of Indiana is lifting those schools up and celebrating them. The Department of Education this past Friday, they host a gala every year where they recognize schools that are doing a lot of things at a high level, but one of the things that they focus on and reward is work-based learning experiences, and they give out a lot of money to pat those schools on the back, and I think that matters. I think it matters when a neighboring district sees a school get $250,000 for knocking it out of the park with career connections. I think that those things catch attention, and I think the department's being very intentional about lifting up those schools and just really keeping the conversation based on kids. And I've yet to find anybody that can tell me that this work is not good for kids. I think traditionalists struggle with the mind shift change, but nobody can say, hey, this is a bad thing for our children. I just don't get that. Because again, to your point, our kindergartners now will graduate in 2037. Their job will be 2045. And the traditional classroom is not preparing them for that world.
Right. Yeah, you say it well. Right. I mean, they say that our current second or third graders, 65% of the careers don't even exist, of what they will graduate into. So, it forces us into that conversation around durable skills and rather than just achievement or an academic approach. Have you guys been doing much around the American Succeeds durable skills and some of that work within classrooms?
So I think right now that work is in Indiana in particular is, you might have heard of iLab, but the apprenticeship push is probably the language that we see a lot, and a lot of work, a lot of energy going into in the state of Indiana, which is a great push. And I get to be a part of those committees and those type of things, but we also have a greater opportunity, to your point, as systems change going pre-K through 12 with career connected learning. And it's one thing, right? But making sure our kids have exposure to know what that apprenticeship might look like when they're a junior or senior is extreme. Right. And I think, Scott, you and I talk about this, and I say this a lot, that at school, it has to be okay with teaching kids what they don't want to do with their life as much as we teach them what they do want to do with their life. And that's what these experiences are all about. Like, you may find that you love to write a grant, or you may find that I hate to dictate and write grants, but I'd much rather stand in front of a room and talk about Playground Paradise. So again, that's just to say the point that I think we have to be okay with teaching kids what they don't want to do with their lives so they don't spend a lot of time figuring it out when they're adults.
Yeah, right. Well said. Hey, I want to shift a little bit. You mentioned career connected learning, and I had a chance to hear your a podcast where you had, I think it was a fourth grade teacher involved, and I think it was the UC Experience Career Exploration at the elementary level, maybe. And I have it. If you're okay with it, I'm gonna maybe drop it in our chat box here for people to hear. But what do you see as that important piece to really see career connected, community connected, but that career connected learning take off in classrooms?
Yeah, I think we live in a society now with social media and access to information that so many people are questioning the why. And I will tell you, anybody in education is seeing that come out in our kids at a younger and younger age.
Mhm.
I've got a 7-year-old that sits in a second grade classroom that is constantly questioning, why are we doing this? And they no longer accept because I told you to.
Right.
The responsibility, and I know we lifted up Be Able and that podcast they did there as well, but so literacy, I think, is the key. That's the foundation to success for any adult, and um, creating spaces where kids are reading about things that they are interested in. So they are reading and they don't know they're reading. They're just passionate about what they're reading about. It is really, really important. And so once we teach kids learn how to read in K1, 2, the rest of their life is reading to learn. But we don't read things as adults that we're not interested in. I don't go to Ed Week and read articles that I'm not interested in. I read things that I want to learn about. Our kids are no different. So why aren't we connecting them with materials that help them grow in their strengths, interests, and values?
Yeah, yeah. You're spot on. I mean, what we're seeing, right, is that we know a lot about ourselves or our attributes in ourselves as early as 7 years old or so, but then we also know that students will foreclose on our school system as early as 9 or 10 years old. So you're doing the right thing. I'm really curious, and as you know, we became connected through Beable. It seems like a great product. Tell us a little bit about it, a little bit about the Hollins Code, the RIASEC. Tell us about the product itself. I mean, we're not here to sell Beable by any means, but I do believe in it, and obviously you do also. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so anybody that follows the World of Work or the Holland Code, it's really just a skills interest survey for kids and adults, right? Find out if you're realistic, investigative, social, very enterprising, artistic, and those type of things. So it's just a tool to help kids identify who they are. And it's not always perfect. I mean, I've got a young lady that's super social, but that didn't come out real clear in her exam, but you could say, you know what, I'm social. And that the power is in how those skills get connected to careers and how those skills get connected to what that child's future may look like. And what happens with a product like Beable or any product that does connection between literacy and kids' strengths, interests, and values. And I keep saying that over and over again, just because I think it's extremely important for every human to know what their strength, interest, and value is. And starting at the age of 7, identifying them so they are connecting and reading materials that apply to them, so that they're doing math problems that apply to things that they're passionate about. In the world of AI, that keeps getting easier and easier to create individual learning plan for every student, because we've got this great tool at our fingertips that can help us develop those learning plans for every kid. And I think the more we get to know our kids through the Holland Code, again, our choice is RISEC, and we have a number of schools in East Central Indiana. Our service centers do an outstanding job around the work of the Holland Code, but and Beable is one of those tools in the toolkit. I know there's others out there, but Beable's been very good to us. Holly's a great friend. a good partner in the work. And what I look for in dance partners when it comes to the toolkit are people that are really passionate about doing what's best for kids and not necessarily passionate about making a lot of money. I'm not saying people shouldn't make money for the product that they sell, but I want to know that your mission is kids first. And I get that sense from Beable. And they use RISEC as their tool to identify that piece in our students.
Yeah, for those of you that are listening or those that are listening, the recorded version, it's Beable, spelt just the way it sounds. It's worth taking a peek at. They are going to be on one of the webcasts down the road with us to talk a little bit about how did they come together. I know David Miyashiro at Cajon Valley was at the forefront of this work a while back. I mean, this is like 8 years in the making. But it makes a lot of sense. What type of over the amount of time, and tell us a little bit about how long have you been invested at your previous school with Beable, and what did you see as far as academic literacy changes by using a product like that, but more importantly, right, connected to like career exploration and the RISEC?
Yeah, this is probably the best time to replug that podcast experience. I can speak to what the experience was from teachers from year 1 to year 2, but that podcast, it's their voice. They'll tell you they had data that backed up that their NWA scoring, which is our formative assessment, the growth was much higher with those classes that were using Beable because kids were reading about things that they were passionate about at their reading level versus the ones that were not. It's pretty plain and simple. And data matters. But again, I would refer, like you said earlier, just take a listen to that podcast and listen to our 4th grade teachers talk about their experience with career connected learning and how it kind of changed the atmosphere of the literacy growth of their 4th grade students.
Yeah, it is really some good stuff. Great work. All right, so I want to shift a little bit of gears here. We've talked a little bit about, or a lot about, like, what is it? What does it look like? Give us some thought on, how do we shift, the broader system itself? What are your thoughts on, how do we get there? What's the how part? Who does the work for us like that? How do we shift the system?
Yeah, so in full disclosure, this is not something I would have said before visiting Switzerland. So if I was to transplant Aaron Black as a school leader and say, what system would you most love to work in? It'd be the Swiss model of high school because 85% of their kids are in apprenticeships by the age of 16, and they're getting work-based learning at their fingertips. And here's the part that shifted in my visit and understanding what they did. Is their education system is led by their employers' needs. And prior to going, I would have really struggled with that because I think, well, we're educators, we should know or drive what our kids are learning. But the realization that I had was that doesn't make sense. Like, educators can't prepare students for jobs that they don't know about. Our teachers don't know about the employer that's making microchips for quantum computing. They don't know that. So we need the industry that is making microchips to tell us what they need to see out of our kids. And that is probably the mind shift change or the systems change that I think would be the most impactful, is for us as educators to be humble enough to say, we don't know what our kids need for that job in 2030. Employers, please tell us what you need and we will change what we're doing to help fill those gaps as our kids get older. And that is a mindset change because as educators, we're really, really proud people and we want to have answers for our students. But I really believe that there's value in listening to our employers and trying to fill the gaps with their voice at the table.
Yeah, good advice. What's the so what does that plan look like for Liberty Perry? What are your first 1 to 3 steps that you think you might be taking?
Well, step one starts next Monday with my superintendent's advisory council. So those are students, 14
Mm.
grades 9 through 12, and I'll sit down with them and I'll ask them four kind of basic questions. What do you think we do well? What do you think we need to stop doing? What would you like for us to do? And if money and time were an issue, what's your pie in the sky dream school look like? So I always start with the students and have those conversations. Step two is start developing employee partnerships that can make connections with kids and help myself and the educators at Liberty Perry understands what those real needs are. And the third thing I do is want to start connecting teachers with employers so teachers can get out and see the local industry and see what those needs are and have an understanding of why this shift in education is necessary.
Yeah, that's great advice. How about, any cautions? What advice would you give? Let's just say I'm in charge of my own school district here, and I'm super excited to get started. I want to connect to my community, do all this work-based learning. What are some cautions that you'd offer for advice?
And I say this out loud to myself in a district that this is going to be a mind shift changes. You got to be patient. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Our higher education institutions are not preparing teachers to work in that world as far as career connected learning. And that's not the fault of any higher ed. That's just not the traditional way of teaching our teachers. So it really takes time, one, to get buy-in, and two, to really prepare your people to have those conversations with our students. And again, I'm not a very patient individual, so I say that, Scott, very humbly to myself.
Yeah.
As I look onto
Same.
the screen. Aaron, you've got to take your time in recreating this, because what I did at Randolph Eastern is not what needs to happen at Liberty Perry.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Makes sense. Why do you think, it's so hard? Why, and David Miyashiro, right? I mean, from
Yeah.
Cajon Valley, right? It was great. I was watching like a panel discussion, and the question was, what makes it so difficult? What is the biggest challenge, I think is what was asked, and his response was, it doesn't exist. Now this goes back a ways, right? I mean, but truthfully, I mean, you think about that, it really doesn't exist. What we're trying to accomplish and do, it doesn't exist yet. But why do you think it's such a hard mindset shift for us in education?
Well, when I do presentations, I ask people to compare a transcript from 1920 to a transcript of 2020 and ask me this: what are the real differences between the two?
Wow.
And really, Scott, when you get to the nuts and bolts of it, there's not a lot of differences.
Wow.
The people making decisions for education, their reference for education is sitting in a row with a book in front of them, and it got them to where they are. So
Right.
they see it as a broken system, and that's to nobody's fault. And the other challenge is a lot of our teachers, the only profession they've ever known is teaching.
Yeah.
They spent 13 years in school, went to a higher ed institution for 4.5 years, and they went back to the classroom. So it's really hard to break that mold of the traditional setting, because honestly, it's all we've ever known. And to David's point, it's different and it's hard to think different. But to think about the changes that's happened in our world from 1920 to 2020, and for you really to be able to look at me and say, Aaron, the biggest difference is the fact that the transcript was handwritten in 1920 and is typed in 2020, that there's something's got to happen. That to me said the world changed, but the educational system did not.
Yeah, in your state, in our state like yours, we're doing some phenomenal things. We've got great leadership at our state level, with ACP and our career readiness and career pathways. So we have a lot of great things taking place. But what I find myself seeing is that it does happen in isolation. We come through with initiatives, great ideas, whether it's through the state level or through our CESA organizations and supporting it. But truthfully, the systems change. I think, you and I will definitely both be retired before we see that drastic shift. So, But man, I really applaud all the work that you're doing. I'm super excited about connecting with you here in April when we have our unconference down the road. But hey, did you get a chance to look at our webcast series at all?
I did.
You did?
Very impressed. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I was just saying, I'm super interested in connecting with some of those folks because what the way we're doing it is not the only way, and to learn from each other, it's exciting. I love what you're doing. I love the work that's here. And Scott, I know it can be discouraging at times, but I do think the number of folks interested in career connected learning is growing tenfold very, very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. In the conversations I get into with other districts and other, thought leaders, and even at that highest level, district office leadership, everybody's interested, but there's a high level of nervousness to be able to, let's put the foot forward and really get after it. We're doing it though. In our state, we're doing a lot of great work. There's a lot of great school districts out there. So I do also want to just mention to everybody that is, either going to hear this in the recorded version or are listening right now, that we are looking at having what we're going to call an unconference. If you're not familiar with what an unconference is, we're going to look at it as being much more engaging than a traditional conference. But a little bit of a heads up, that's going to be in April. We're looking at Aaron Black coming and being a part of that. So I hope you're good with a mic in your hand, walking around, asking big questions and engaging the audience. Appreciate wearing that Wisconsin Badger shirt too, probably when you come to town. But we're definitely excited about being able to pull together something, to offer to our state and around this great work, and to have yourself and a few others that are a part of our guest list with our webcast are going to get involved too. So those of you that are attending live right now, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat if you want right now. But I do want to move into kind of that final question to you, Aaron. As part of our tag, it's the future is clear. Teach like it's 2045, right? What do you feel education, the classroom, the school looks like maybe down the road in 2045 or even maybe 2035? What do you see it to be?
I honestly, the heart of me, Scott, wants to see a world where every student has an individual learning plan. Every single child's learning experience can be different, I believe, with the technology tools that can be in front of teachers. And that's educators are still going to be necessary in 2045. Our profession is the most protected profession in the world, right? But the way that we use technology to create individual learning plans for every child is where I hope we're at in 2045.
Yeah, that's great. So if anybody, I'm sure you're okay with this, but if anybody wants to get in touch with you to chat or to pick your brain, how can they do that?
Yep, I'd be happy to drop my email in here, and please reach out to me. I love to engage in this conversation. I love when folks kind of challenge as well, because that's where growth happens. But yeah, please reach out to me via email. You reach out through Scott too, but I'd happy to be engaged. And if I can be a help in any way in moving the needle, work-based learning for your connected learning in your district, I'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Aaron. Definitely going to lean on you a bit. So, and if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can do that through our CESA 2 website, or you can reach me at scott.carr@cesa2.org. I appreciate you joining us today, Aaron. Thank you very much. And as we depart, remember, the future is clear. Take care, everybody.